Hey everyone, it's time for Tim's Final Confessions, and it's time for the fourth edition of the Night Ranger Deep Dive. This time around, I'm joined by John Gaffney from Lair the Alchemist, also Kicked in the Teeth, an AC/DC podcast. And John is one of many folks who kindly contributed to Sing Me Away, the Night Ranger album review, coming soon, I promise you. Um, and looking forward to it. And John, this is the album we're going to talk about is one of the albums John contributed to, the fourth Night Ranger album from 1987, Big Life. So here it is on vinyl. So take a good look at the blue background there, and then I want you to take a look at the cassette version and see if you can spot the difference.
Yeah, it's
There's
got a,
more stuff in the background.
yeah.
And there are versions of the vinyl that look like this, just not the one that I have. So that's one of when you're collecting, that's one of the things to look for with this album is the differences in the album
It's
cover.
strange that they would put the more stuff on the cassette version, which is smaller, much smaller. You would think
Yeah.
the vinyl would have more detail to it, whereas the vinyl has the more sort of straightforward cover.
So this version that I have, this is a Canadian version. It's actually a Columbia House. So there are versions
Oh
of,
yeah, you're right. My version has the more
yeah.
stuff on the cover.
So I
Yeah.
wonder where, where yours originates from. Is
Mine
it,
is
because obviously it depends.
Camel MCA.
So is it from the US?
I'm gonna guess that yes, it is from the US. I don't
Okay.
have the record in front of me, but I mean I have the cover in front of me. The record's on my turntable.
So
Uh
it might be a retail version as opposed to this, which is a Columbia House version. So obviously there were some variants there, which is
yeah,
interesting.
but you said yours was the Canadian one, right?
Yeah, but I'm not sure about the US Columbia House version. If that's, I don't know. I'm not sure which, they may have sent these to the record clubs first to get them printed up. I don't know. This cassette I have is a US cassette and it's a retail one and it's got the full. So I don't know. And my CD, I've got the old US CD and it looks like this as well. It doesn't have the
Yeah.
extra stuff.
I'm looking at the vinyl covers on Discogs, and it looks like the European one has like the one you have. The US one is like the one that I have, which is MCA Records.
Yeah.
Mine is, whoa, this is weird. No, this isn't possible. MCA Camel. Wow, because mine says Camel. It says that it must be either the Mexican or Japanese version. That's really weird because I just got this, I think, nowhere special, but that has this cover. I'm looking to see if Canada has like the one that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This,
so it's just different, I guess, just different territories for whatever strange reason.
yeah.
Australia has the cover that you have. That's just for whatever strange reason. Probably because who is it released on no, it's MCA Records
I think by this
in
time it was
Canada.
pretty much the same label
Yeah, for
all over the
everywhere.
world. So
Yeah.
I know the first couple there are some differences in labels, but the other thing that's kind of fun, if you look at I would encourage everybody that has this to look at the actual label of the album because um, it's not called Big Life, it's called The Big Life. It's got the in there for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah, Martin. Whenever Martin, I've ever had Martin pop off on this kind of stuff drives Martin crazy.
Well,
Like
it's the
where,
inconsistency, right?
yeah,
And
right. It's
even
like we were talking about. We do our AC/DC podcast, and when we did our is the album called For Those About to Rock, We Salute You? Or is it because it
right.
says on the front, it says For Those About to Rock, and on the back, it says We Salute You. Sometimes you see it written For Those About to Rock, dot, 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 We
Yeah.
Salute You. Sometimes the We
Yeah.
Salute You is in parentheses, it's just like,
Yeah. I know that things like the ellipses and stuff like that drives Martin up the wall. It's funny when he starts gearing up, so I know exactly what he's going to say. But even the cassette, even this cassette says Night Ranger, The Big Life. So
wow,
it's almost as if whatever was pressed first, um,
possibly.
they hadn't quite decided on whether to put the in there.
which that happens, that
Yeah.
happens because I'm
Like
looking really quick at the lyrics and
it
no, it
never
doesn't
it,
say
it never
the
says
big
the big
life.
life. It's
No, it says
always,
big life. Close
yeah.
enough to call it big life. It's what you make it, what you make it, big life.
Oh, so what would have been even worse, and this is another thing, we're picking on Martin here. This is another thing he hates if they called the song The Big Life, but the album just Big Life. It's not
Yeah.
really a title track. It's
Yeah.
like a quasi title track. Yeah. It's like I mean there's lots of examples of that. It's like Alice Cooper Goes to Hell. Is Go to Hell the title song? Not really.
Yeah.
Uh and I've even seen copies of one of my favorite Aerosmith albums, Night in the Ruts, but I've seen copies where if you look on the spine of the vinyl, it'll say A Night in the Ruts.
Yeah.
So it's just little things like that. I mean,
Yeah, it's funny. Even I think it's like the anniversary of Kiss Alive or Kiss Alive 2 or something. I've been seeing a bunch of people posting about this, that there's some copies of that that erroneously have like two or three songs listed on it that are not on the record, like Let Me Go, Rock and
I
Roll,
think that's the
Hooligan,
yeah, that's Alive too. There's a that's a
yeah.
fairly well-known error where there's three songs. Yes, Tomorrow and Tonight, Hooligan, and one other
Yeah,
song from that
yeah,
era,
right.
and which that's the kind of thing that collectors like us we sometimes look for. And
And
I'm yeah,
even
go ahead.
even sometimes the artists don't realize. Like I saw an interview with Ian Anderson about Broadsword and the Beast. It was when the album had just come out, and he's on like I don't know MTV Europe or something like that. And the interviewer is like, "Is the name of the record?" No, the interviewer says something like, "Your new album, Broadsword." And he goes, "Let me correct you. It's Broadsword in the Beast." And he goes, "Well, that's not what it says on the spine of the record. It just says Broadsword
Yeah,
or something like that." And he's, "It does? Let me see that." And he's looking at us like,
yeah,
"Oh, gee, like, that's a mistake." Like he doesn't
yeah.
even realize
It's
it.
it's hard because I mean you're as a musician. I mean nowadays it's different. A lot of people do pretty much everything themselves, but you're relying
Yeah.
on people to
Yeah.
get it right. You submit these things to them. This is what we want it to be called, and yeah, that's really interesting. Um, So I suppose maybe we should talk about the songs. This
Yeah.
is the follow-up to Seven Wishes. So they're coming off two back-to-back platinum albums at this point. Very, very successful. Now there was a longer gap between these albums than previously, almost 2 years. So Seven Wishes came out in May of 1985, and this came out February of 1987. And a lot changed in the music industry in that time. It wasn't as I wouldn't say it was as drastic a change as say, 1990, 91 going into the grunge
Yeah.
era. But it was still pretty, for mainstream rock, it had changed a lot. And Night Ranger reemerged. And I think they found it difficult to compete with a lot of the bands that had emerged in 86, 87. So, but we're here to talk about Big Life, and we're going to go through it track by track. This is the first album that was not produced by Pat Glasser. So he produced their first three albums. So this time around, they work with a big name producer, Kevin Elson. And I know we talk about this in the book, but what do you think of the change between, say, Dawn Patrol, Midnight Madness, Seven Wishes into Big Life?
I mean, I like the production on the earlier records probably better because it's a little simpler. It's a little more guitar heavy, a little the production is more guitar focused and more hard rock focused sounding, where this is like you mentioned, it sounds like a lot of the other records at this time. It's slickly produced. The drums have that sort of late 80s kind of sound to it. The guitars are certainly there, but they don't have quite that upfront sound that maybe you get on the first two Night Ranger records. But I will say that I have a soft spot for productions like this as long as it doesn't get too crazy over the top. I like things that are very AOR and melodic and synthy and 80s sounding. So this and it's a very thin line that has to be straddled for me, where it can, if it falls over onto the other side, it's too much and I don't like it. And probably the fact that I like Night Ranger and I like the songs. So I don't think it hurts them too much. I mean, I can imagine that's maybe if you're somebody that discovered them on the first record, that it would be a bit too much for them, the change, but I like it. But again, I have a soft spot for this kind of thing. This is when I was in high school, so this kind of sound, this synthy MTV produced type of sound. I find it interesting, and I kind of like listening to it with headphones on. I was listening to it before we recorded here with my headphones on, and I think it's a pleasant listen. It's not maybe dated, but it's not like there's any frequencies that are obnoxious or uh, so I'm okay with it, but it's definitely a product of its time, and I can see how somebody who only likes the first two Night Ranger records, the production might have turned them off because it is slick. It is very late 80s. It's very, I don't know if it's because of the soundtrack song on here. It just makes me think of that kind of late 80s type of type of MTV slick sound.
My feeling on the production is that even though Pat Glasser produced all three of the first three albums, I think those albums all sound quite different to each other. Dawn Patrol's got a tougher sounding production. Seven Wishes was actually quite a light sound for them, especially in the drum department. I love Seven Wishes, so but it was definitely made for radio play. Midnight Madness is kind of somewhere in between. I will say that I think that Kelly's drums sound pretty good on this album. It's sort of a fuller, um, a deeper crack to the snare. Some disagree with me on that. And what's interesting is that this is Kevin Elson, who's a big name producer. But this album, if we're going to just focus on the drum sounds for a second, if you listen to something he had produced not too long before this, like Europe's The Final Countdown, the drums don't sound at all like that album on here. The Final
Yeah.
Countdown's very electro sounding,
Yeah. Yeah.
very much of it's probably a combination of electric and acoustic drums, but the way it's recorded is extremely slick. And it doesn't sound like any of the Journey albums either. It doesn't sound like Escape or Frontiers. Um, and the other thing that's interesting about this is that they wanted to work with Ron Nevison on this album. But Ron Nevison at this time was finding himself an extremely in demand producer after producing the self titled Heart album in 1985, which is just a
Mm.
huge hit. Then he produced Ozzy's The Ultimate Sin. Then he went back to work with Heart on Bad Animals, and then he worked with Kiss on Crazy Nights. So Night Ranger, that might be one of the reasons that this album didn't come out, say, in late 86. Maybe they were waiting, I don't know, and then decided to go with Kevin Elson. But there's always a reason why bands work with certain producers at a certain time. Sometimes you don't always get your first choice. Sometimes, I mean, if a producer's in demand, they'd be booked for months, maybe years out. And but what's interesting is that they do have a full circle moment in that Ron Nevison does produce both of the Damn Yankees albums. So he works with Jack Blades on those, and then he works with Night Ranger on the Neverland album from '97. But for now, we've got Kevin Elson at the helm, except for one song. And it gets started with the title song, Big Life. What do you think of this?
Yeah, I think it's cool. It's melodic. It's got a pretty big chorus. It kind of right away with there's like that sequencer or like a keyboardy kind of sound that puts it right there in what was happening
Yeah.
at that time. I did want to comment that, like, with the production and with the sound, to me, it's not that jarring because Night Ranger always, I mean, even going as far back as Midnight Madness, they're sort of moving towards this. It wasn't like they were some really raw and dirty band that all of a sudden got a really slick
That's
production.
yeah,
You
that's
know,
it's not like Metallica going from
exactly. Yeah.
Justice for All to the Black Album, like
Right,
in terms of
right.
sonics.
But even with this, you hear that sort of sequence type of keyboard thing,
Yeah.
and it really, that does make it sound a little stiff and gives it sort of a, very much in its time, that kind of ZZ Top like sequencer
Yes,
thing
very
going
much.
through it.
Yep.
But it's still a good song, it's catchy, it's a good album opener.
Yeah, it's anthemic.
Yeah, right,
It's
exactly. It's got a big chorus and
yeah. Yeah, it's got a good riff. I mean, it's Night Ranger, one of the things I think that we tend to like about them is that even when their songs are more rocking, they're usually quite up and positive, and that's what we like about this band. That certainly continues with the second track, "Color of Your Smile." This one is the word that comes to mind when I hear this song is summery. Like this sounds like a summer song. Um, it was a single, but it wasn't really pushed, and I think it could have been a hit single. It's a shuffle. It's very poppy, and I it's a catchy sing along song, I think.
yeah, that's a good way to describe it, like a summer type song. And
Yeah,
when I think of Night Ranger, they're certainly not a band. I mean, I don't consider them heavy metal. I can see how metalheads might like them because of their first record and even the second record, but I think of them as just solid melodic rock.
yeah,
Yeah, they always have that kind of uplifting, those choruses that just kind of feel like they lift, and they're very, yeah, like you said, kind of. I did a video on Triumph on my channel not that long ago, and I was thinking the same thing, that Triumph is
S
like this band that's very like positive,
not dissimilar.
somebody's
Yep,
out there
yeah,
somewhere,
yeah, not dissimilar.
right. And I was talking about Fight the Good
fight the good
Fight,
fight. Yeah,
even
yeah.
though that's has a pretty heavy chorus, it's still like the lyrics are
Never
very,
surrender.
yeah, never
Follow
do
your
they're
heart. Yeah,
very uplifting,
yeah,
very like, feel good type of
yeah,
thing. And I think a Night Ranger kind of in that same category. They're a rock band, and they do have that fun. Again, it's a good way to kind of describe it, that like summery, summer nights kind of
yeah.
vibe.
This is not a dress all in black and turn all the lights down and light candles. This is not, this isn't that kind of vibe, right? And the thing about this band too, it never sounds to me like they're forced to write this way. It always sounds like this is just the way that they write songs, so there's an honesty to it. They just want to write feel good uh rock songs. Now there are some songs on here that get a little bit deeper, but um next up, we have kind of a mid-tempo song, "Love Is Standing Near." This one is the first one that Kelly Keiki sings, and I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, he's this is I love when Night Ranger does ballads, and I love when Night Ranger does these sort of, this isn't a ballad, but the tempo is far enough down and it has this feeling to it. They're also very good at the kind of like, remember when we were young, remember when we were
Story,
in
so
love,
yeah,
remember.
Jack Blades is great at the storytelling songs, like "When You Close Your Eyes" and
Yeah, exactly. I
"Sentimental
absolutely
Street," and
love
yeah,
that kind of
yeah,
lyrical thing. And Kelly, I love his voice, and I love him on the ballads, and I love him on the sort of mid-tempo. They're mid-tempo in a way. They're not like a heavy mid-tempo. They're like
right,
just a very melodic, sort of laid back, almost a ballad, but a little too
yeah.
fast to be considered a
Yeah,
ballad.
yeah,
But
they
it's
sort of excel at those types of songs, and I guess the best way you could describe them is that how do you differentiate? Well, these types of songs generally don't have riffs per se. It's more of in this case, it's sort of a dual keyboard guitar melody. But yeah, Kelly's just got this, like nobody talks about either of those guys, Jack Blades or Kelly Keagy, as great singers. I think they're both fantastic.
yeah,
Maybe
and
that's
they
the bane of having two singers in a band is that you tend to
yeah.
they cancel each other out when people try to think of their favorite rock singers. But Kelly's got this naturally soulful voice that
Yeah.
that can just he it just sounds so natural to sing songs like this. He can sing rockers too, and Jack can sing ballads, and we'll get to that shortly. But yeah, Kelly just he just opens his mouth and sounds good. He's just one of those guys. He's just got one of those great voices.
Yeah, and I also think that I mean, if you added up the Night Ranger songs, I'm guessing that Jack, he sings more. He probably sings two-thirds of the songs, do you think,
Especially, yeah, I would
compared to
say
Kelly?
so, especially of late. The latter
Yeah.
day albums, Jack does
Yeah.
sing the majority of the leads. Yeah.
Yeah, and even back then, I remember it was kind of like and maybe because he's a drummer too, it seems like this sort of special
Again,
thing
it's like
that the
Triumph,
drummer
right?
is.
You've
Yeah,
got Rick Emmett out front playing the
yeah,
guitar. He's kind of the front man, and then Gil on the back, who's does his share
yeah,
of singing too. But yeah, singing drummers, it's not a common thing. And Kelly, to his credit, he did do something different about it. He always sets his drum kit up
yeah.
sideways.
So whenever I hear his songs, I always sort of picture,
Yeah,
the way his microphone was always off
yeah,
to his side, and so it always felt like kind of a cool bonus thing that
yeah.
like your drummer sings. When the drummer sings a song, it feels like it's sort of like a special bonus thing that your band has because it's so
Well,
infrequent that you
and
have
when he
lead
sings,
vocalists as
yeah, and
drummers.
when he sings as well as that too, right?
Yeah.
Like he's
Oh,
not,
absolutely.
um, yeah, if you didn't know the band, if you saw them opening, say, for another band in the early days, you might, a song might come in and the vocals start, and you look around, and you go, well, where's the
Yeah.
drummer's singing this one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I always like that one, Love is Standing Near. And then the side one closes with, I think, kind of an epic ballad.
Yeah.
Rain Comes Crashing Down. This is um, this is a darker ballad, and I've read the lyrics and listened to it, and Jack's delivery, and I've often wondered if this isn't about somebody, talking with someone that's depressed or someone that has seasonal affective disorder, but it's very it does sound like I mean, yes, the atmospherics at the beginning, you can hear thunder and you hear, there's some effects there, but it feels like a rainy day, dreary, overcast type of feel to it. And it's very much a mood piece, but I really enjoy this one. I think there's some powerful vocals on it. And I think because it's quite a long song, it gives Jeff Watson and Brad Gillis lots of room to shred. And I think, as you mentioned, like, yeah, there are metalheads that do like Night Ranger. And I think what gave Night Ranger the cred was the fact that they always had these two, not one, but two
Hmm.
guitar shredders that you'd always see them in the guitar magazines or the ads for amps and ads for,
Yeah.
whatever, right? And they were both, it wasn't like one guy played rhythm, one played lead. They were both equally good
Yeah.
lead players. Plus the fact that Brad had the brief stint with Ozzy's band, I really think that gave him a lot of cred with people, and they just kind of followed him over to whatever he was doing because people tend to do that with the Ozzy guitarists.
Yeah. And also the fact that both of them have really unique sounds and they're sort
Yep,
of known for Brad Gillis is known for his whammy bar
yep,
things, and Jeff Watson was known for like doing like four finger, eight fingers on the neck, sort of
yep,
tapping things. So they had like this technique thing that each one of them, Jeff's was he had his thing, Brad had his thing. They had their own unique sounds, so they complemented each other. And not unlike, I never really thought of it like this, but not unlike the vocals between, Jack
yeah.
and Kelly, that
There's
they're
a lot of
different. They each have their own
yep,
thing,
yep,
but they're different enough to separate them where you're not sitting there trying to figure out who's singing.
right,
They're different enough so they can each sort of excel at a certain thing, just like
yep.
the guitarists do.
Yeah, it's they're an interesting band. I mean, you might look at them and say, well, yeah, they're a five-piece rock band, but the way that the way that they came together, so you've got a situation where you've got these two guitar heroes basically in one band, and for the most part, until things went sour, there didn't seem to be a lot of competition for space. It's like they work together really well. uh, but you've also got a situation where your rhythm section are also your singers. And I can't think of
Hmm.
another band that's quite like that. There's bands with multiple
Yeah,
singers, but it's a really unique, and I think that's what makes them so tight in their
yeah,
arrangements is because their roles are so well defined.
yeah. And this is a good song, I think, to end the side one. And it also, I mentioned earlier that maybe this album, because of the production, because of it being so sounding, trying to sound like what was happening at that time from a production standpoint, that it might have turned off people that maybe were fans from the first one or two, three records. But then a song like this shows that, they were trying to do something different, that they were trying to sort of push themselves a little to do something, a little bit of a longer song. It's got a little
Yeah,
bit of different mood than their other songs. I'm not going to say it's progressive, but it has like some things going on in it, like you mentioned with the guitars and it and everything like that. So it's them kind of doing it would have been easy for them to just try to write a 3 minute and 25 another 3 minute and 25 second
yeah,
rock song and hoping that it somehow gets played on the radio.
yeah,
But you can tell that they want to, there's some integrity here, that this is something that you mentioned it earlier. It doesn't feel like they're trying to radically change their sound because they're trying to get on MTV or something like that. They've always been a melodic rock
yeah.
band for me.
Yeah,
So
it's not like they started out like you said super heavy and then mellowed their sound. They've always had this
yeah,
melodic approach in them. It's just that they're the thing about Night Ranger that I've always found is that they're somewhat in between, bands like Boston and Foreigner and bands like that, and then bands like say Def Leppard and Whitesnake, and they're kind of in between. They look more like the harder the hair, what would be called hair metal bands, but they sound more like the AOR bands of the late '70s. So they kind of occupy this interesting space. And what
yeah,
another
and they
thing I
came
really
out. Yeah, no, go ahead, finish your thought.
well, I was going to say the other thing about Rain Comes Crashing Down is that it doesn't sound like it per se, but it reminds me of the song Call My Name from Dawn Patrol, which again is a
Yeah,
darker ballad. It's
yeah,
not written to be a radio single. I mean, this one, Rain Comes Crashing Down, I just looked at the record. It's 4 seconds shy of 6 minutes. And I don't really hear how where you'd edit anything. And I don't necessarily hear this on the radio. Not because it's
right.
too heavy. It just doesn't have this is a song to be listened to as part of the album, and I think it's fantastic the moods it creates, and it goes through. You're right, it does go through a lot of movements for a commercial rock band. It doesn't it's not a one note thing. It's definitely there was a lot of thought that went into the arranging of this song.
Yeah. Okay. Side two.
Yeah, side two. So this is what I think is I think one of the things that might have, because I think people forget how successful Night Ranger were, because Midnight Madness was a platinum album. Sister Christian was a top five single. Actually, went all the way to number one in Canada. Don't When You Close Your Eyes was the top 20 song, and then even You Can Still Rock in America didn't hit the top 40, but it got a lot of video play on MTV. So that album was a really big success for them. And Seven Wishes came out and solidified that success. They did it again. Another platinum album, another top 10 single with Sentimental Street. Then they had two other songs, Four in the Morning and Goodbye, that both hit the top 20. So they were fairly consistently successful at this point. And where this album slipped a bit, it stalled at gold, and there were no top 40 singles off it. But I've always wondered, I think that the band and maybe the label too were putting all of their hopes that by having the title song from a Michael J. Fox movie, that was going to be a guaranteed smash, and this was going to be a song that just it was going to be their say Eye of the Tiger, or just a
Yeah,
big
yeah,
or soundtrack song. I'm talking about The Secret of My Success, which was issued I think a little bit in advance of the album. Now this song really is dated to its time as far as the
yeah,
production, and when I look at this also has something that you don't often see with Night Ranger albums is outside names in the songwriting. So Jack Blades
yeah,
does have a credit on it, but it's got David Foster, who also produced this album, Tom Keene, and Michael Landau. So it feels like a big corporate thing. And the first thing you hear on this song is a sequencer doing that
yeah, yeah, yeah. Very.
like, and that runs pretty much all the way through the song. It's got the synthesized horns, rat. Dun, dun,
Yeah,
like it's
yeah,
got
the
that.
key sound is
Yeah,
very, yeah.
yeah. Now, I'm saying all this, uh, and you can call it a guilty pleasure, but I like the song. I always did, but I can see where it was very, very different for them. It was not, this didn't sound like something that they just wrote. This sounds like it was made to order. We want you guys to do a song for this
Yeah.
movie. Michael J. Fox is starring in. The title is The Secret of My Success. Go. And on that end, they delivered. But for whatever reason, this song just did not catch on, even though it's no more, no more or less, say, cheesy than Kenny Loggins' Danger Zone, which is a huge hit from a movie. This song just did not resonate with people. It stalled at 64, and it was the biggest success from this album, which is to say, The Secret of My Success wasn't much of a success.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was wondering when the movie came out. And so the album came out, uh, Big Life came out on March 23rd, 1987. And the movie and the soundtrack both came out on April 10th, 1987. And it's puzzling because, as you were also talking here, I'm looking at Wikipedia. And on Wikipedia, it says the secret of my success in parentheses from the motion picture soundtrack of The Secret of My Success. And I thought, is that on my album? That stuff in
It
parentheses? And I
is.
went and looked and it is.
It is. Yeah,
And
they
that's a
were
very
really pushing it.
strange, yeah, like it
That
made me,
almost that almost sounds like there was a scheduling bottleneck in it that because usually the soundtrack would come out first. Now that doesn't
yeah,
mean that the single didn't come out earlier, but
that's true.
usually when you have these big corporate things happening, they want all things to be hitting at the right times. And I mean, first of all, like you mentioned, early spring in the year is not your optimum time to release an album, right? You usually want to release it at the beginning of summer, or you want to release it before Christmas. And the whole thing, it just makes me think that this album was delayed or got the record label pushed it back for
Well,
some reason. Maybe they were waiting on this movie because they thought it'll be worth the wait. This will make you, this will be it. You guys will have a huge hit with this song. You won't have to worry. And I don't know.
yeah, maybe they were trying to even time it to come because they did come out only a couple weeks apart from each other. And I'd imagine that the movie commercials for the movie were probably all over. You were maybe hearing this song in the trailers. I don't know. That'd be interesting. I
Well,
should go back and
what
look at a
actually
trailer.
I do know a little bit about that from watching the Fans in Motion podcast. On the trailers for this movie, they did not play this song. They
Okay.
played Walking on Sunshine by Katrina and the Waves, which had been out for 2 years at this point. And it's been said that, think what you will about the song The Secret of My Success, it doesn't have that quick hook like Walking on
Yeah, you're
Sunshine
right.
has. So you know, I don't know. It seems like things didn't fall in. It definitely didn't fall into place the way that they would have liked. And as far as I guess a lot of people say, well, the movie wasn't that successful. It actually, if you look at the box office, the movie was successful by really anybody's standards. What really they're saying is it wasn't Back to the Future. It
Right.
wasn't, and Michael J. Fox, that made him a big star. He was already a star on Family Ties. He was a TV star. This wasn't what you would think. This was not a star maker movie for him. And there's no guarantee. And this was the era of soundtrack songs. There were,
Yeah,
Footloose
yeah.
and Top Gun, and there
Right.
were that would
So
have all kinds of artists, right? Um,
it
I
was a
mean,
big weight if you could have a song on a soundtrack. So it kind of makes me wonder if, and this would be interesting if you ever had a chance to interview the band, that maybe the song was intended just for the soundtrack, but then as the album came near, they decided to put it on the album, or it was always intended to be on the album, but they decided to put that from the soundtrack of them. That to me is so strange seeing
yeah,
that from the sound. It's like, and also when you listen to the song, if you talk about the song specifically, I remember hearing the song and thinking, now everything I said before about me liking 80s productions, remember I said it's a fine line, it's a
yeah,
thin
yeah.
line. This falls on the wrong side of that line for me. It sounds like this isn't even, this was maybe recorded and produced at a different studio with a different producer
But it
or
was, yeah,
there,
it totally it was.
yeah, and so
David
it
Foster
doesn't
produced this one, so it doesn't fit with the rest of the album.
exactly. And this has a very kind of corny, the good sort of synth sounds. The
Yeah,
drums sound very drum machine like. I mean, it's a very, very slickly produced song that could have dropped into any of the soundtracks in the late 80s and would have fit right in. So it makes sense why they would have done that. It's a shame that I'm I would really would be curious to ask the band, did you intend for this to be on the record or did you just intend for it to be on the soundtrack? And, just the whole story behind it. Because to me, it
yeah.
feels like a record company move. It just feels like something to try to push the record. And even though you mentioned that this album, Seven Wishes sold what did Seven Wishes in the States? It went platinum in the States, but Midnight Madness, I guess it sold the same as Midnight Madness. It didn't feel like it was quite as successful as Midnight Madness, but that's just because Sister Christian in the
Right.
States was the top 10 song. But Seven Wishes still sold well. So I don't know. It's just a strange song. It's a shame because it turned me off. I didn't listen to this album till way until I started getting into vinyl, like in the late 90s. I just ignored this record because of this song. And not that I think it's a bad song. When I listen to it now, I'm kind of like, yeah, this is a pretty good
The
song.
chorus is, I
Yeah.
think, is prime Night Ranger. It's anthemic, it's catchy, the worlds collide, and it's got it, I like Jack and Kelly trading off. Like Jack sings most of it,
Yeah.
and then Kelly comes in with the secret of my success. And so it does have a lot of bells and whistles on it. And you would also, yeah, and I think I mean, ZZ Top is an excellent example because if you think of Eliminator and especially Afterburner, like a song like and I like the song, but Sleeping Bag, that is so doom zoom doom doo 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 doo, like it's got so many effects that you can't do on stage unless you play the tapes
Yeah.
and play to them. Um, so yeah, this I wonder if this was an idea that Jack had, and then they brought in those other writers to pretty it
Yeah.
up. I don't know. It is interesting, and I really think that they put all their eggs in that basket, and it didn't work, and unfortunately they never quite recovered from that commercially.
Yeah.
This album, even though this album went gold, I still ended up seeing it in all of the cutout bins because I think they pressed too many of them. They were
Yeah.
expecting it to sell. And that's another interesting thing. Like this band, I have to think that they sold a little bit more than they did, especially those first two albums, and especially the fact that Dawn Patrol isn't even certified gold.
Wow.
If Midnight Madness and Seven Wishes are both certified platinum, that could mean that, say Midnight Madness sold like 1.9 million, is just teetering
Yeah.
on double platinum, and then Seven Wishes just got over a million. We'll never know, right? And
Yeah. That's true.
so for Big Life to go gold, well, that's probably on the momentum of the those two albums that came before it. Because, like I said, if you don't have a hit single driving the album,
Yeah.
it's not gonna make it. And MCA, MCA wasn't a great label for harder rock bands anyway. I kind of put them in the same category as A&M or RCA. They just weren't your top choice labels like somebody like Atlantic and Elektra and Geffen, where you always saw ads, or even like
Hmm.
Mercury, you always saw the ads. I think
Yeah.
MCA just they either didn't have the budget or they didn't, I don't know. Um, so anyway, that song was kind of a flop, and it's interesting because it did kind of, you know, if they wanted that the centerpiece of the album, I guess the best thing I can say is that at least they didn't open the album with it. They
Yeah.
still let them open the album with the title song. They said, no,
Yeah.
put this will be the first song on side two.
Yeah.
So after that, we're back, I guess, into the main album, and a really good, I think, up-tempo rock song, Carry On. And this is the good up-tempo rock song that Kelly sings.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a fun. They seem to like to throw these in on the records, just these kind of just all out rocker kind of. You can imagine them playing it live. Maybe I don't know if they did, but it just has that kind of raw sort of just energetic sort of rock energy. And I guess coming off of Secret of My Success, and even some of the other songs that are a little bit more produced, this one is just kind of showing that they can rock out
Yeah,
type of thing. And they always seem to have a song or two on the record that are just kind of like, hey, we can just turn the guitars up and rock out. And
it's
I
a
think that's this song.
it's a pretty guitar intense song. I mean, it's based on a guitar riff, and I really like this one. And this is that anthemic thing that Night Ranger do very well. And this, but unlike the Secret of My Success, this sounds like it came naturally.
Yeah.
Now the next song is interesting. I would like to hear it with a little bit less, like I said, bells and whistles. Better Let It Go. This song, again, it starts off with the sequencer like a drum machine where it's a doom da do
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
some almost something like Genesis would do, like at that time, like
Yeah.
tonight, tonight, tonight. It almost
Yeah.
kind of sounds like that. But I think there's a good song here, and it's a song about Kelly Kagi around this time had some addiction problems, and I guess he'd kind of gotten past that, and this song is about that. And it's got some nice acoustic guitar in it. So I think there's a really good song here, but I think it's sabotaged by two things where I'd hate to play this for a new listener and this be their introduction to Night Ranger because it's really dated sounding. So you've got those drum machines happening, but you've also got the French horn keyboard
Mm.
sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
And nothing dates. There are two things that will date an album
Yeah.
quicker than anything. One is electronic drums, and the other one is a bad keyboard sound. And that French horn sound, there's a Don Henley song from around the same time called Sunset Grill, and it's got that whoop, 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 it's got that same
Yeah.
keyboard patch. I
It's
wish they'd
supposed to
have,
sound like a horn, but they didn't have the technology back then to totally
no,
make it
it's
sound like that.
so and I laugh every time it comes up, but I do like the song, and I think Kelly sings it
Yeah.
well. I like the melodies in it. I like the bridges in it. So, yeah, that's one that there's a good song in there. You just have to kind of listen through the '87 production of the time.
Yeah, I totally agree about everything that you just said. I really like the chorus in it. I like the way he sort of jumps up, let
Yeah,
go, the
yeah.
way he sort of jumps up and even though it's sort of this heavy subject matter, it still has sort of a uplifting,
It's
happy
again, it's
feel to it.
anthemic.
Yeah,
It's
it's
got an anthemic
anthemic
feel
and
to it. Yeah. I do want to go back a little bit and mention this because this is something that I didn't know until much later in life. I remember seeing the Secret of My Success video on Much Music just a few times, not that many. It didn't get a lot of play. Night Ranger were never a band that got a lot of play in Canada anyway, um, except for the time of Midnight Madness. But there's a quote unquote horn section in the video, and there's three guys, and they're doing like they're doing that. If you go and watch the video, the video that's on YouTube is a really bad copy of it. It looks like it came off somebody's VHS. I wish they'd put a remastered version. But that horn section is the three most unlikely guys you'd see standing together. Well, one of them in particular. It's Vince Neil, Tommy Lee, and Weird Al Yankovic. So watch The Secret
Wow.
of anybody that hasn't seen it in a
Yeah.
while. Watch The Secret of My Success video. That's who those guys miming the horn parts are. It's Vince and
Yeah.
Tommy and Weird Al.
Yeah.
How that happened, I'd like to know how that happened. And the other thing that the cheapness about this is that they also, at the same time they did that video, they also shot Color of Your Smile. I didn't even know there was a video for that until just a few years ago. But they used the exact same set.
Yeah.
And that
Gotta be
set doesn't
assignment.
make any sense
Yeah.
with that song. So, I mean, the video is basically this album cover come to life.
Yeah.
But anyway, enough about that. Next up, we have it's a song that starts out, you think it's going to be a ballad, but it ends up being kind of an up-tempo rock song called I Know Tonight. And this song is interesting to me because this is 1987. And when I hear this, minus dial the keyboards back, and I don't think this song would sound out of place on the first Damn Yankees album.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. And it's kind of interesting that it's a good song. I like it. And a lot of bands, this would be like the lead off single for them. But Night Ranger is so good at writing this melodic rock
Yeah,
stuff that by the time you
exactly.
get to this song, it kind of is like, yeah, this is a good song, but it's nothing, nothing like really, really special. It's just a right there, kind of Night Ranger type of song. And again, they're so good at this that a song like this can kind of feel like a
You
deep cut,
you
whereas
almost
other
take it for granted, right? You're like, well,
exactly
of
right,
course
because
it's
it's
going to
just
be
kind
good.
yeah, this is kind of what Night Ranger does here, these
Yeah,
melodic, the melody lines and the
yeah.
choruses and everything. And it's just interesting. Again, there's other bands where by the time you get to this point in the record, it's like these are the total throwaway type of songs or the hit songs that they a lesser band would
Yeah.
love to have this song.
Well,
This would be the
yeah,
lead. This would be the
yeah.
big hit off
You know,
their
you say
record.
you had a let's say you had a band that put out 3, 4 albums, they weren't really doing that well.
Yeah,
If the record label heard this, like that's it, that's the hit.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's
We'll
that's
buy
what
this song
we'll yeah,
off of Night Ranger, and
we need this one, you know. Uh yeah, I mean if you listen to this song and then you listen to a song like Runaway from that first Damn Yankees album. I know Tommy Shaw
hmm
sings that one, but not that different. I mean,
right.
it's interesting. In 3 short years, a lot changed for Jack Blades.
hmm
But so then the album closes, I guess, somewhat predictably at this point. This is the third time in a row they close the album with a ballad, and Hearts was a single, was a video, was not successful. It peaked at number 90 on Billboard, which is, you know, it's not a great showing. Now, I think it's a good ballad, but I don't think, I think by 1987, rock had changed enough that this just wasn't gonna this was more likely to get played on adult contemporary stations than it was on a on a on
Yeah,
a
and
on a on a say what you a pop station or a a top 40 station.
and I mean, I love the song because I love Night Ranger doing ballads, and
Yeah,
that's everything that I've stated before. But in some ways, it might feel like maybe they're going back to this well too
yeah,
often after the success of Sister Christian and
yeah,
Sentimental Street and Goodbye. And,
yeah,
maybe they're just going back to this too much. And I mean, I could listen to a whole album of them doing ballads and enjoy it, but they probably shouldn't have released it as a single because they should have said, you know what? We've done enough ballads. It's going to seem too predictable to release it as a single. I can understand why it would have flopped
yeah. This might
as a,
have been another example. This might have been an example where the label was like, all right, guys,
yeah,
you know what we want, give it to us. And
yeah,
to their credit, yes, I think they did come up with a good song. Kelly's vocals on it are fantastic, you know. Again, he does that sort of hearts away, like he does
yeah,
that
yeah.
soaring
Oh,
thing.
so great.
There's some great guitar melodies at the end. Like I think Brad, there's some great stuff on here.
Yeah, yeah.
But by this time, I'm sure that it felt like one too many. Like,
And when you're a band like this and you've written a song, even though there may be a degree of burnout factor with, let's take the burnout factor out. When you've written a song like Sister Christian, which is like one of the best rock ballads of the
oh
80s,
yeah, yeah.
top five, if
Yeah,
not number one.
that's a gold
It,
plated like this
exactly. It's
that's
like
a very
the
that
stairway to
yeah,
heaven
that's a
of 80s
special
rock
yeah,
ballads.
that's a special song. Like that's not just a good ballad.
Yeah,
That's some there's something
yeah.
more that's elevated there.
That's Freebird,
Yeah,
Stairway to
it's
Heaven.
one of
It's
those
like that of
it's
that.
it's a song that'll outlive us all.
Right. So when you've written a song like that and you've written other really, I think Sentimental Street and Goodbye are
Yeah.
just beautiful, absolutely fantastic ballads. A song like this, which is still really good, but when it lives in the shadow of
Well, it's
those
almost
other ones,
like,
and
for the label to come to them and say, "Okay, do it again." It's like, you can't just do that every time. It's just
I
not
know.
going to happen. Like I'll give it a shot, but for radio programmers too, especially like by this time, it hadn't quite hit, but you had Guns N' Roses
hmm
and the Cult Electric was starting to, there was a heavier sound that was creeping into mainstream rock at this point. And the radio programmer gets hearts away. What does this sound like?
Yeah,
Like, and
yeah.
it's like, no,
And
so
don't forget a lot of the hair bands at this time too. It was a standard formula to release a ballad, the Ballad of Jane from LA
yeah.
Guns. And
But when
it's
Night
like
Ranger,
everybody was
yeah,
trying to, and Night Ranger sort of invented
and
that
when Night Ranger did it
almost.
though, for some reason it seemed even lighter. I don't know
Yeah.
why, but yeah, and it's a shame. And the other thing that's weird about this album is that It's 1987, and usually albums had 10 or sometimes 12 songs on it. This only has 9 songs on it, and it's almost like they were missing a couple songs, but they had to get the album out.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I mean it adds up just a quick scan here. One, two, three, four, five. It's like 21 minutes on side two. Side one is 18, probably about 19, 20 minutes.
yeah,
So
I mean, like Rain Comes Crashing Down is a long song, and
yeah,
so it's lengthwise, but it just didn't. It seems odd that by this time, I mean, because Seven Wishes had 10 songs on it.
yeah.
So, but it just seemed to be the format, which brings me to the other thing I want to talk about on this album. Night Ranger wasn't a band that had a lot of extra songs, but there is one that pertains to this album. Um, in some countries, it was the B side of Color of Your Smile, and it's a song called Girls All Like It. Now, this song sounds like it was recorded around the same time as Big Life, but um, I think it's okay. I could see why it didn't make the album. Although, having said that, it would be nice if, say, Rock Candy Records reissued this and added that because it was from the time period, and there just aren't a lot of extra Night Ranger songs. But are you familiar with this song?
Yeah, I remember I did listen
Yeah,
to it after we last spoke about this
yeah.
this record, and I agree with you. It's nothing too incredibly
It's
special.
a B-side. It
Yeah,
sounds a perfectly good B-side, but to bring it back into Damn Yankees land, this
yeah,
song was kind of mined for I want to say it's the song Rock City from the first Damn Yankees album. They kind of borrowed Jack kind of borrowed some parts from it, which I guess makes sense if it's a song that not many people heard. But
yeah.
um, yeah, a lot of people have said they don't like the way he sings in this song. It's kind of a snotty,
Yeah,
eh,
punkish,
yeah,
like he
and it
has this
doesn't really
weird sort of,
fit. Yeah,
yeah, and that's not an attitude or thing that these guys are too clean cut. I don't think of
and
Night
there's a certain
Ranger
amount of
as,
class. So when
yeah,
you hear them do
exactly.
that, girls, oh, like it just doesn't
Yeah,
seem to. It's I know that, and you get this in a lot of later albums where you really hear, yeah, Jack's love of the Rolling Stones, but he's just not Mick Jagger. He can't pull off that sneer
yeah, and
in
some
his
bands have,
vocal.
you mentioned Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses had this dangerous street,
Yeah,
these guys are like whiskey drinking, heroin, like dirty,
yeah.
street garbage type thing to them. Whereas Night Ranger, these guys are nice guys that drink
Well,
Coors Light on the
yeah.
weekend. They're
Not,
not like, scary and
right.
dangerous and
Yeah, the image thing was definitely a band's, the image thing was becoming more and more, and after you had Guns N' Roses, I mean, it wasn't long after that Skid Row followed. They had this
yeah, they had that
they
tough
had
kind of a,
unpredictability to them. They had a guy with a nose chained, and
yeah.
Night Ranger were just a clean cut rock band. They weren't from the street. They grew up on streets, but they didn't go on, not
Yeah.
the street.
Yeah.
Which, that's no fault of theirs, and they still, I think they delivered a good album, but I've said this many times, and this happens to a lot of great bands. Sometimes it's just not a band's time anymore. Their commercial spotlight was, there's a time limit on it. And if you look at most bands, there's about a 5-year period where they're really, really big.
Hmm.
And it's not that they don't come around in popularity again. And Night Ranger had to endure what so many bands did and go through some obscurity, but then they came back to the point where they're able to headline theaters, and they get special guest slots on other gigs. And I'm happy to report they're still really, really good live. This is
Yeah.
not an album that gets a lot of attention in set lists. And the interesting thing about the Big Life era, now I'm not a bootleg collector, but my understanding is that it's just about impossible to find live recordings from the Big Life tour. And it's kind of strange because you'd think by '87 it would be more commonplace, but apparently there's a big hole, where you don't hear a lot of material from this era live.
Yeah, and you could say that this is a classic if you're looking at the arc of a band, that this is the beginning of the downslope for
Yeah.
them sales wise and everything. Man in Motion will come out next, and that would do maybe the same, maybe even less. And
It
then,
didn't even Man Emotion didn't even certify, and this was their so this certified gold, and then eventually the greatest hits that came out in '89 certified gold, and unfortunately that's it, which
yeah,
is a
and
shame.
then the winds of the winds of change would arrive in
Yeah.
91, 92 with grunge. And
I call that the great leveling because that kind of put everybody on the same, really on the same playing field. I mean, that knocked everybody down
yeah.
several pegs. So,
And
uh,
you mentioned, bands having it's a 5 year run. And I say this all the time. Time moved at a different speed back then than it does now. Now we sit here and it's 5 years between every Iron Maiden and Judas Priest record
right.
and everything. But 5 years back then was a lifetime. A
Yep.
lot happened. 5 years in the music industry back then when bands were releasing an album every year with a
Yep.
live album thrown in there with movie soundtracks and all the other stuff that was going
And newer
on.
bands coming out all the time.
Yeah.
I remember in, say, when I first really started getting into buying albums around 86. Okay, this is 1986. Bands like Quiet Riot and Twisted Sister, oh, they're so old. That was 83. That was 84, which is just, but that goes to your point. It seemed time moved differently. Whereas now you blink an eye and it's like, what year is this? Yeah, it's just a different thing. But for in the music business at that time, you had to stay out there in the public eye, and 2 years in between albums was a long time unless you were coming off a major blockbuster. There weren't too many. I mean, Boston was an exception that pulled it off. Obviously, Def Leppard, but I mean, very few bands could go that long because people will forget you if you don't keep the albums coming up. But looking back at it now, I think Big Life is a perfectly fine Night Ranger album, and um, sometimes it's like I said, it's just not a band's time anymore. But if, like you said, any other band had gotten a hold of some of these songs, they might have had hits with them. Because I mean, if there's one thing we know is that Jack Blades is a proven songwriter. He's worked with a ton of different artists, so there's no fault to the album there. It's just this was an interesting. We'll call it an interesting period in their career. You seem to be muted, John.
Sorry about that. I
Oh,
just said I
there.
agree with you. Yeah, I
Oh,
muted it there.
okay.
I was coughing for a
Oh,
second, so
okay.
I forgot to unmute. But yeah, I agree with everything that you said. It is sometimes it's just a band runs its course. And then unfortunately for Night Ranger, they got lumped into the hair metal thing, which I never considered them a hair metal band because their first album came out in 82, I believe. So they sort of predated.
If anything, they were a proto,
Exactly,
very good
right.
example of. But they always had, yeah, like you said, they always had a melodic sense that a lot of bands.
Yeah, it's easy to understand how they were able to
Yeah.
coexist and to
Yep.
continue to exist in
Yeah.
the glam, LA hair
And like I said, they
world.
they looked more like those other bands at
Yeah,
first glance.
they were close enough, and with their sound, they had enough guitar in it to be able to fit slot into that world. But and unfortunately, it unfairly, I believe, when the grunge thing happened, that they sort of get lumped into all that hair metal stuff when I think that they were a much better band than a lot of those
I think that
glam hair bands.
I think Night Ranger had something special. They were just kind of a cut above in terms of the songwriting, in terms of
Yeah.
the melodic sense, in terms of having, how can I say this? Um, Singers that could really sing.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, this wasn't, hey, yeah, he's a pretty good hard rock singer. No, they're good singers. They,
Yeah,
they,
they had
they
a
would be good
chemistry with
singers.
the
And
band, the
yeah,
singers, the guitar players. It was just a really kind of strong
it
band. It
was a
wasn't like,
winning combination. And
yeah, absolutely.
so, John, I want to thank you for helping me discuss Big Life. And if you want to find out more about what John said about that album, I'm going to have a link to below for my books, which is where, Amazon, which is where all my books are available from. At some point, this will be available. I promise you. Sing Me Away, the Night Ranger album review. I want to thank my buddy Matt Phillips, Go North Design, for designing the cover. At this point, this is just still a proof
Awesome.
copy with the
Yeah.
watermark, but can't wait for people to see it. And this is all part of it, the deep dive. So yeah, we're going to continue on. I have a rotating cast of co-hosts, and I want to thank John. Don't forget to check out Lair the Alchemist, and
Mhm.
also Kicked in the Teeth. And you have
Into the
another
Void, a
Into the
Black
Void.
Sabbath
Yeah,
podcast, and a Pod Somewhere in Time, an Iron Maiden podcast.
Oz.
Yeah, lots of stuff to keep you busy out
He's
there.
a busy guy. All right, John. Thank you very much
Thanks, Tim.
for doing this, and we'll see you all later on Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Go listen to some nice.